Okay, so I'm going to do a short presentation on reaction practice, which we're going to then go into small groups and start exploring that. Oh, advice Didi, she's back. Yeah, good. So the plan this afternoon is that we'll hear this presentation, we'll go into very small groups, and then we'll come back together again as one group at 4:45. And then I'll just do a few closing remarks, make a Dana appeal, and then we'll all report out very briefly, and we'll end at 45 minutes later. Okay. So that's where we're headed right now. Thank goodness. I've got a plan. It's nice to have a plan. So reaction practice is a term that probably most of us are familiar with now. It's quite a new practice, which has mostly been introduced by Subhuti in a kind of concrete methodological sort of way. But I've certainly seen it growing over the last few decades. I think, let's think. Yeah, when I first read the Windhorse Trading Seminar that got produced in the early 90s, I think, where you had a bunch of Windhorse trustees, business trustees, asking Bhante in seminar, was it possible to gain insights in your daily life or in work life? Or did you have to go onto an intensive meditation retreat in order to do that? And his answer was always, no, it's possible to do that kind of level of practice in your daily life. And the way that he took the discussion was towards reactions over and over again. He said, look at your reactions and don't calm them down, go into them and find out what's really going on. It was a very bare bones of it, but that is where it first showed up. And I was very excited about it, I remember, in the early 90s, just what he was describing there. I mean, the Windhorse Trading trustees couldn't believe it. And they kept asking, from what I remember, they kept asking the same question every 6 pages. And he would go through it again, and they would ask it again. I think they were so full of the view that they were just sorting out gift shops and running a business, and that the next level of spiritual practice was not available to them. So they'll park that. And then I think I've watched particularly the Satipatthana meditation retreats and the Satipatthana explorations be developed and deepened over the last maybe 25 years in our movement. And what that does in particular is bring awareness and bring meditation technique to a particular Nidana chain, or if you like, a particular process of how the mind is created, how the mind is structured. Contact with the world informs the mental states underneath. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Your picture is frozen, this in Saddhanandi.
Yep.
Hello.
We could hear you though, even though your picture's frozen.
Can't hear you.
What was the last word you heard me say?
Can you hear
Reaction
me? That's what the last thing you said.
Good. Before I went under and disappeared. Yeah, very good. A drowning woman, just before she went, she said, can you hear me? And then she disappeared. Yes, okay, good.
Contact with the world informs mental states underneath.
Yeah, okay, so was that Satipatthana? Was I on Satipatthana, Tamil Nadu?
Yes.
Yes, great. Then we've got the mind training slogans, okay, and that points you in a similar direction. Doesn't give you the mechanism, but it does take you in the same kind of ballpoint area. You know, slogans like turn all blames into one, meaning all our reactions of blame, which we usually put onto other people, can be tracked back to our own patterns of self-clinging. Okay, so that was another area where it was just taking us in the same direction. And then over the last maybe 10 years, there's been quite a lot of exploration of Papancha as an Adana chain. I think Subhuti was introducing it a bit in India, particularly around harmony and how disharmony is created. Looking at Papancha is very interesting for that area. At the same time, I was studying it, you know, with one or two other teachers myself, and beginning to realize this was quite a key part of the whole mechanism of what we needed to get to grips with. So again, it's following a bit like a Satipatthana technique. It's just following that process, but in slightly more detail. And again, it's showing you how the mind is structured. So at the end of the verses that I sent you are Milarepa's, the Milarepa text. You should have on the last page a description of root poisons and the reaction practice as described by Subhuti in November 2006. Do people have that roughly? Yeah, good. So
I don't think I have Saddhanandi, but I mean, I can just get it later.
You can.
I only have the Milarepa thing that Caroline sent out.
Okay, she sent out an older version. That's what's happened to ICD.
So I've got the root poisons, but not the reaction practice.
Oh, okay. So probably I kept it as a secret. I thought I'm going to give that teaching, so I won't let everybody know the answers yet. Okay, that's good to know what my strategy was.
I don't have the root poisons either, Saddhanandi. It's got the first generation text.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So when Subhuti was introducing the reaction practice again to Adhisthana community at the beginning of lockdown, when we began to think this is maybe what we're going to need a bit of instruction around reaction practice. He drew on a quote from a lecture by Sangharakshita called The Meaning of Spiritual Community. And I think you'll find it in the little booklet called Human Enlightenment, I think. Actually, Papa Vadri might know the answer to that, being a Windhorse lady. And in this text, The Meaning of Spiritual Community, he describes the root poisons as something which, you know, we're working with within the spiritual community. So he describes craving, aversion, and delusion. This is Bhante, and he's using a Tibetan text to describe it very simply. And it's a very good description because in a way it's describing what we are at root in a very simple way. So basically we have a reaction. We have a reaction to things that are happening in the world, and we're having a lot of reactions to a lot of different things. And we're having a reaction because existentially we are being threatened by something. Okay, it's all very simple. We're quite basic, really, for all our sophistications. So what we've got to do is start noticing where those reactions are happening and really value them as a deep piece of information, okay? Just don't look at them in terms of I'm a bad person or I'm a good person or anything like that. Just think, what information is this revealing, this practice revealing? Think of it as a learning process. So treasure your reactions, Subhuti tells us, because it's a way of us understanding ourselves at a much deeper level. We're always insecure. All of us are insecure underneath everything. And this is fundamental to us having an ego identity. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring an awareness to that level of ourselves, bring an awareness to the level of insecurity that we experience ongoingly, and our surface reactions are an indication of where that fear or that threat is being felt. So our insecurity manifests as reactions based in craving, aversion, and delusion. So I'll just read you that description, which some of you have and some of you don't have. Craving is a longing desire to possess objects of sensuous cognition, which you like, and to include them in your ego identity, in the hope of getting a sense of security from having them as a part of you. And aversion is defined as fearful and angered repulsion, to get rid of objects of sensuous cognition which you dislike, and to exclude them from your ego identity, in the hope of getting a sense of security from not having them as part of you. And delusion, which is defined as a stubborn, closed-mindedness about learning anything which you feel might threaten your ego identity and upset the sense of security you wish to get from it, but which you are unaware of, and therefore you feel you must protect. So just say that again, but in just one or two sentences. So when we have an aversion, when we have a reaction of craving, of desire, which is often quite hard to identify because generally it's fairly pleasant unless the desire is thwarted, unless we can't get the thing that we want, but generally it's, it's quite pleasant. So we have an experience of desire because we've seen something out there which can add something to our sense of security. Then we have a sense of, or we have a reaction of aversion, fearful and angered repulsion, because we see something out there, or maybe experience something in here that we want to exclude. We do not want part of our ego identity. It threatens the idea of who we are. So there's something in that we do not want as part of us. And delusion is a closed-minded resistance to learning anything that is a threat to the views we hold as a security. So we've got a whole network of views that we base our security on, that keep us safe. And sometimes we're in contact with another view, which we experience as making us vulnerable or insecure. So recently, just to give you a personal example, when I was spending time with Shubhayua and James and Sabuti in Maes Gwyn, we got into a discussion about the things that I do at Adhisthana which are helpful and the things that I do at Adhisthana which are not helpful. I can't remember how I fell into that trap, but somehow we ended up having that conversation. And I had an incredibly emotional response to hearing that information. It was unexpected and much larger than any of us had anticipated. And several weeks later, when I was washing up in the kitchen or doing something very simple at Adhisthana, I suddenly realized how much of a view I have that I am a helpful person. So I walk around telling myself that I'm a helpful person, that I help people, that I contribute in a particularly helpful way. And I do this by in all sorts of ways. So to receive information that was telling me I was not helpful was receiving information which was very, very threatening on quite a deep level. Although all my team was telling me was that they'd rather I didn't wash up so much. So on the surface, it seemed very, very small. Yes, on the surface, it seemed very small, but on a deeper level, it was quite threatening to me. So first of all, you have to, so the process is that you have to recognize you're having a reaction. I suspect most of us are aware enough to know what a reaction feels like. It has physical sensations, usually of heat. It could be of tension. You can feel emotions being triggered in you through physical sensations. It's all very familiar ground, I'm sure. And you immediately, as soon as you feel that, you immediately know this is a situation which could give me more information about myself. And you might not be able to do that process in the moment. You might have to go home and do it at home, kind of thing. You might not be able to do it there and then in the moment, but you know, I'm having a reaction. And this means that it's triggering or touching a sense of insecurity in me, even though the thing itself might be very small. And then later on, you're going to explore for yourself what it is that's being touched or what it is that's being triggered. So you're going to turn towards those sensations, turn towards the experience, and begin to understand what's underneath that. And we were talking a little bit about that this morning. What's underneath those responses in us? And see, maybe there's a value, maybe you've got a core value that's being threatened in that moment. You know, a sense of wanting to contribute is a value. But then you need to go underneath that and find out why is that triggering a reaction? You know, why is it so difficult to be with? And you begin to realize that there is actually security. You've got security that's caught up and invested in that particular value. So you're going to try and reach that. You're going to try and reach that. And that insecurity is going to be centered around a view of yourself. So what you're touching in on in that moment is some aspect of yourself view. All of us are going to be working in this area. I'm sure all of us are doing this work. I'm not saying anything that's very new to you. It's just making it a little bit more conscious, maybe. I think craving reactions are quite, well, because they're often not very unpleasant and sometimes quite innocuous, quite sort of subtle. They're not so easy to spot, but you know, maybe we heard the voices of that just a few hours ago when we were talking about stories that we tell ourselves. So there are going to be some stories that we tell ourselves that have got a pleasant sensation with them. And again, we're just re-establishing over and over again the view that we want to hold about ourselves. We're re-establishing a security that we have in ourselves. Yeah. So I think that's probably all I need to say right now. So what we're going to do is I'll take a few questions in a minute, but we're going to split into small groups in a minute, and we're just going to then explore one or two reactions that we've remembered and see if we can get to the insecurity that lies underneath that. That's the plan, okay?